Good morning. Namo Amida Bu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Hello, Scott. How are you?
I am well.
Good.
I got my coffee. It's a bit early for a Sunday morning, I have to say. Although, you know what? Actually, I do just naturally get up early. I had a very long day though yesterday with one niece visiting us from the States. She arrived on Friday, and then there was a busy day yesterday. Anyway, and my other niece came in from London, so it was a big day. It was nice, but very busy.
Yeah.
Because I cleaned the whole house first, and I went for like a very long hike because it was a beautiful day, and then joined up with them as well. So
Great. The weather, I mean, I've heard the weather in England isn't often very clear, I guess. You guys don't get a lot of sunny skies, but
it's it is depending on where you live in England. Yeah, it can be. Yeah, there's a lot of rain. There's lots of rain, a lot of gray days, and so especially like winter. Pretty much all winter, it's just gray and wet. That's pretty. But I've just sort of acclimatized to it. Like I've reacted to it like it's relaxing rather than like it was not being sunny all the time. It's kind of like, well, it's just kind of relaxing. You don't feel like you have to be outside and although I do go outside even when it's raining. I go for my walks. I become a proper English person. Rain or shine, I go for my walks. Although actually, am I being too loud? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Just fully close that door, please. Thank you. Sorry, it's being too loud. Although what I was going to say was English people do tend not to. They try to avoid the rain, even though it's totally part of their lives. But I don't. I walk almost every day, whether it's raining, pouring, even in those crazy storms. I went out. I was like, because I hadn't been out in like 2 days. I hadn't been out of the house in like 2 days last weekend, and I was like, okay, that's it. I don't care if it's the third major storm and we have an amber alert. I'm going out.
Yeah.
And I went out for about a half an hour, got about halfway, and I was like, I was going to go a bit further and go down by the river. And as soon as I started to turn to do that, massive winds like started really blowing, like gales. I was like, oh, perhaps I won't do that. So it did curtail my anyway. Yeah. So yes, questions. Longevity.
what we are here for.
Incept dates. And where may I find this JF Sebastian? Sorry.
Well, I found a passage that I referred to in our last talk. So I thought I might just start by sharing that.
Okay, that sounds good.
And then we can go from there and address other questions that you might have as well. So this passage is actually the one about even those who slander the Dharma, if they turn around, if they have a change of heart, they're all born in the Pure Land, that passage. And it actually turns out that it was actually written by Shinran Shonin. So it is his words. And it's in the hymn of the Nimbutsu and True Shinjin, or the Nimbutsu Shoshinge, which you of course know about. Shoshinge is the hymn in at the end of the chapter on practice in Kyogyo Shinsho, right? And that is the hymn that is pretty much recited at all services, you know, the daily like liturgy or service for pretty much all the Jodo Shinshu denominations. So there are basically 10 Jodo Shinshu denominations in Japan, or 10 schools of Jodo Shinshu, one of which is the one that I'm a member of, the Jodo Shinshu Honganji Ha, and there are others like the Eastern Honganji, and there's Takada Ha and Izumoji Ha, a few other schools as well. And they all have the same Shoshinge as the basic liturgy, right? And that's because it was actually printed in book form by Rinyo Shoni, together with the Wasan, or the Japanese hymns of Shinran. It was printed in a book and distributed to temples within the Honganji tradition. And it became so popular, basically, that other schools adopted it as well. It kind of spread beyond just the Honganji. And so today, all schools of Jodo Shinshu basically use the same, you know, liturgy. It's kind of like the Book of Common Prayer, I guess you could say, from the Church of England, you know, point of view. I can't hear you right now. Are you on mute?
Sorry, so do you mean, so other denominations of just Jodo Shinshu use it, or do other?
Right.
And
within Jodo Shinshu.
Within Jodo Shinshu, okay.
Yeah. So all Jodo Shinshu schools who view Shinran Shonin as their founder. Of course, there are other Pure Land and Jodo, you know, more broadly, Jodo schools in Japan as well.
Yeah,
and those don't.
Among them, it's one of them, right? Jodo Shu.
Right, and even within Jodo Shu, you have Seizon Ha, or Seizon school, and then you have the one that's probably the most well-known today, which is the Chinzei school. Okay. Which was founded by Bincho Shonin, I believe, a disciple of Honen. And then the Seizon Ha is a lot more like Jodo Shinshu in their teaching.
Oh, interesting.
And they were founded by another disciple of Honen. And it's very interesting, actually. If you look at Jodo, the Jodo schools, you know, they were all founded by disciples of Honen, right? Honen Shonin. And broadly speaking, there's basically two camps. There's the practice camp, which emphasizes practice, whether it's saying of the name, or in the case of Chinzei Ha, they actually practice all kinds of things. They teach that practices other than the Nimbutsu can also be the cause of birth in the Pure Land, which is really different from Jodo Shinshu, right? And then Seizon Ha is part of the other camp, which is the faith camp, it's called. And they emphasize the more of the Shinjin aspect of the teaching. Okay. But yeah, so to go back to what I was saying about Shoshinge, it's basically the hymn that is used by all Jodo Shinshu schools. And that's in Kyogyo Shinsho. But there's another version of it in the Passages on the Pure Land Way, or Jodo Monrui Jusho, which is a somewhat shorter work. If you know, in the collected works of Shinran, it's probably the second book or second work in that. And it's basically the same content as Kyogyo Shinsho, but it's kind of abbreviated. It's like an abridged version of Kyogyo Shinsho that only has the passages from the 7 Pure Land Masters. In Kyogyo Shinsho, as you know, Shinran quotes a lot of texts in masters, not just the 7 Pure Land Masters, but some other, Chinese thinkers, Buddhist thinkers, and so on. But in passages on the Pure Land Way, he only quotes the 7 Pure Land Masters. And in that book, there's also a version of Shoshinge. And let me go off screen because I have to pull up the, okay, here it is. And well, it's all really good stuff. So I feel like I want to read it all, but to just read, to kind of get to the quotation that I was referencing last time, I think it starts around here. So, okay, so this is, I'll quote it now. Necessarily then, we will reach the dawn of supreme pure Shinjin, whereupon the clouds of birth and death in the 3 realms of existence will clear. Then the pure, unhindered radiance will be luminous, in the true body of the Dharma realm of oneness will become manifest. When persons awaken Shinjin and utter the name, Amida's light embraces and protects them, and in this life they acquire immeasurable virtue. This light, boundless and inconceivable, never ceases a moment, nor does it differentiate by time or place or any circumstance. That the Buddhas protect persons of Shinjin is truly beyond doubt. In all 10 quarters alike, they joyfully praise them. The deluded and defiled and those of grave evil all equally attain birth. Those who slander the Dharma or who lack seeds of Buddhahood, when they turn about at heart, all go to the Pure Land. And this passage, as you can see, Shinran states very clearly, no doubts, no question whatsoever, that even those who have in the past slandered the Dharma, if they turn about at heart, all equally go to the Pure Land. No question about it. So that's the definitive answer for us.
Yeah,
follow Jodo Shinshu.
I think that's a common one that people worry about. Did they ever say something at some point in their,
right
before the Jodo Shinshu, where they, might have been, because I've heard over the years, I've heard a lot of people raise that, question, where even if they didn't know, or if they said, yeah, I know, or whatever. What it should, am I just, is this lifetime just a wash then? Until I have a lifetime where I don't do that. It's like until I have a human birth where I don't do that, whatever. But I've had those thoughts, but I don't, when I look back, I don't think I've ever verbally done that with, even with sort of more atheistic friends in the past, when I was discussing or atheistic or agnostic themes in life with anybody. I think Buddhism always got, like I said, always got a pass. I could never be as certain that about that as I was, I never had the certainty that I had about other things. I never had that certainty about that I could assert things about Buddhism that I felt like I could about other things, that certainty, that was certainty of mine, quote unquote. But anyway, but I don't think I ever, it's just because I've gone into those atheistic, agnostic mind states, or, mindsets, of various kinds, and wondered whether, that somehow it's like one of those bells. If you ring that bell, can that bell be unrung? Like on a karmic level, or does it have to just burn itself out? Because once, like we talked about in the other session, once you convince yourself that you're so skeptical, and that you're so critical in your analysis, and you're so rational, like once you convince yourself of that, you start using that methodology to start just start to think, does it comes back, like we said in like we talked about in another session, that's a recurring, combined with other things. Now it's combined with a whole lot of like I said, philosophical pessimism, and and cynicism, and just questioning everything, and nothing gets everything gets leveled. But I just wondered whether I even just mentally kind of took my place to the same state as someone who actually did verbally slander the Dharma. You see what I mean? Whether I,
I think you're talking about like on a practical side, have you become so habituated to thinking in skeptical or super rational terms that you're kind of incapable of how to entering into that, that world of faith kind of that people from a religious, people who are religious, clearly are entering into, right?
Spot on. And I know, like but at the same time, I've always been very spiritual, it's just a major contradiction when I did go into that. Because I am very, very intensely, I've always been very intensely a seeker, very sincerely, intensely a seeker. That's another thing that really screwed me up when I got to that point of questioning things, But
I don't think that
you're
they're
spot
necessarily.
on. You're spot on with that. That's what I worry. Have I excluded myself just by that mind state? Not necessarily by verbally slandering the Dharma, but by going into that mind state. Have I self-excluded and just have worked my mind capacity to be able to be receptive of faith,
Right.
Even though I do have, like, there's things I can see about me that, like, I don't have absolute faith, I don't have that Shinjin faith, but I have faith to a degree, as it were.
Right.
Very strongly in some ways, in some areas, or you could call it very deep conviction, deep heart, mind, heart conviction, but still I worry, still that's there, that am I anyway? So that's good to hear that, actually. That's good. It's good, because people have raised the same thing when those questions have been asked before, and come back to that passage. I forgot, I forget where the passage was. And
well, now you can point them to the words of Shinran and say, here it is. It's written right there.
and there's also an interpretation of all the five, what's it called? The grave offenses, the five grave, or grave wrongs, or grave, that it's sort of, if you have turned out at heart with any of those, you can still be saved by Amida.
That's right.
That's I think the when the teaching basically, it's kind of like Amida is saying, look, these things are really wrong, and you're really, these, I'm not trying to put words in Amita's mouth, certainly, or in the teachings of Buddha's mouth, but it's like, these things are really wrong, and they can really warp your mind state. And you kind of self-exclude yourself if you do these things, because you know what I mean? That's kind of how I sort of see it. But it's really wrong. It's like I've heard I've heard the analogy of, it's like a mother, saying, I'm going to kick you out, if you don't start behaving, or not something like that. That's never, you would never say it, but do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to, I'm going to disown you, or, if you don't stop, stop this is terrible behavior, mother really super chastising their children, but she would never completely reject her children if, I don't know, something like that. I think I've got that right. Analogy, something along that line. And it's kind of like, how we've talked about how I think at the last two sessions, we mentioned Honen, when they had to when Shinran, would say, and at some point Honen, I think, had to say, look, this doesn't, just because you are saved by Amida doesn't mean you shouldn't try, you shouldn't live, you're not required to live by Buddhist morality, you still should try to live by the precepts, not out of, that it's going to earn you any merit or change your mind state, or, to back to Buddhahood, but because it's good for you. It's, you still should do these things. It's not like Shinran said, just because we have the antidote doesn't mean we still take the poison. So,
Shinran also says that in this age,
you still should follow morality. You still should follow, even though I saved you, no matter what, no matter how evil and wretch and, deluded and ignorant and immoral you are, you still should try to live by. Do you see what I mean?
Right.
It's, the 5 grave offenses are, that statement, except for, offenses. That's kind of like saying that in a really strong way, especially about these things, like these really bad things you should not do, because they really mess you up, and they hurt. They're very harmful to you and to others. So like, don't do these things, or else, but the or else, if you truly are turn around at heart, you're not, you won't, you still can receive Shinzen of Amida.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Shinran actually, and maybe this is a topic that we can even explore more, but the so-called exclusion clause, in the primal vow is obviously a real question. It raises a question, right? Can everyone actually, is Amida's compassion really universal, or are people being excluded from his compassion? And Shinran's answer is very clearly no, it is universal. And the exclusion clause is, like you said, it's something that Shakyamuni said in order to sort of warn people, kind of deter people, like, it's really better not to do these things. You shouldn't do them, right? But it's not that if you have done them, you're beyond salvation. So, and Shinran, discusses this in detail. I believe in Kyogyo Shinsho as well. But another interesting thing is when it comes to, morale or the moral aspect, is Shinran says that in the time we live in, there are no precepts, he says. And Rinyo Shonin, when he talks about how should we, the question, and it comes up a lot nowadays, is, how should people who follow the Nimbutsu live, and so on and so forth. And Rinyo Shonin, says we should follow the law and obey the precepts of humanity, or the principles of humanity, is what he says. And that's kind of actually a term, I believe, that is in Confucianism, maybe, and it basically means, be a decent human being to the best of your ability, and don't murder, don't steal, don't do these things. I think Paul Roberts actually had good explanations of this topic as well. But so it's not that we have to try to keep precepts. That's kind of a different thing. It's that we, it's not an excuse to just, go out and rape, pillage, and plunder,
We still try to live morally. We should still try to curtail our,
right.
and, to the best of our ability. We should still not be completely wantonly hedonistic. We should, try to, we should not be completely, utterly selfish in our behavior toward other people. We should try to be generous.
Right.
We should be, and if we fail, we fail. But, and Amita still, but you should try to do these. You just still try
exactly.
Because within your karmic limitations, behave yourself as best you can.
Exactly.
And I guess in sort of, I've heard people say, and I've felt this way, doing it almost out of gratitude to Amita. I want to be this way. I'm just out of natural gratitude to Amita. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is that kind of, is that anywhere in the teaching where out of gratitude you try?
Well, there is the expression of.
I've heard people talk about that. I've had that impulse myself. That sense of, okay, I want to do this just because Amita's, because of Amita's path and compassion, and
right.
And vow, I want to try to do this. I'll fail miserably, but
I think it's a great, aspiration. I mean, I think that, there is what Shinran says about not drinking poison just because you have the antidote, right?
Yeah. That, when I heard that made so much sense to me. When this was years ago. Many years ago, and I was trying. I couldn't recognize. I was like, when I found out about that, the whole encouragement to be, the teaching of Shinran and Honen to try to be moral and be. You're expected to try to, I was like, if we're spiritual idiots and we're these wretched evil beings with these, how are we going to do that? How can we? And I couldn't get it. I just couldn't. I was like. But that's like and I was thinking, that's like self-power though, to try to, and all this stuff. I just couldn't, I didn't. And eventually when I actually heard that, when I heard him say, just because we have the antidote, we don't take poison just because we have the antidote.
Right.
And that just clicked. That just made perfect sense. That just cleared it up for me. It just okay. No.
But in Jodo Shinshu, at the same time, we tend to not, tell people how to live their lives, right? And the reason is because this teaching is really intended for our salvation, right? It's it's not a how to put it, it's not like a social program for how to live a good life, right? That is an important distinction we have to make. So, and I think too, even about what you said about being a decent human being, I mean, that is common to not just Buddhists, but all religions, right? I mean, people have values, that encourage them to, not kill, for example, and, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a common to humanity, really, even beyond, even people who have no religion at all still, have ethical concerns, right? So, in what is right and wrong. And so yeah, it is very important. And then Shinran, in this passage, he mentions the slander of the Dharma, but he also mentions another thing is those who lack the seeds of Buddhahood. And that's a reference, of course, to the Icchantika, or people who don't lack the seeds of Buddhahood. So, and I think you also have a concern about this. Do I not have the past causes or abilities to?
And I have to say, I have wondered sometimes if I, not that I have all the behaviors of an Icchantika, but not that I have all the mindset and behaviors of it, like what's described as a Icchantika. But I have wondered, am I incapable? I have wondered that. Am I just, at least in this lifetime, just incapable of any kind of, I have wondered that. I have, and still do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
Well, and it's an important question because this is raised, I believe, in the Nirvana Sutra. There's the description of these people who just simply lack, they're beyond hope, basically. They don't have the seeds of becoming a Buddha. And
they seem like they have absolutely no penitence, though. Like that's where I'm different. That's where I'm different. I have shame. I have a sense of, wanting to change or not wanting to be whatever way, I am, or do you know what I mean? Of not wanting to be this wretch, evil, deluded, ignorant, obscure, being that, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, and that's, so I think in another translation of the Nirvana Sutra, it does say, even these people who lack the seeds of Buddhahood will ultimately be saved in the end. It does clearly. So that was a response, I guess, to that concept that arose in China. And then Shinran here in this passage clearly says, even those who slander the Dharma and those who lack the seeds of Buddhahood, when they turn about at heart, all equally are born in the Pure Land. So again, I think we have to be careful not to be too focused on our abilities or lack thereof, because we're measuring, like I've talked about before. If you ask, "Can I be born in the Pure Land?" the answer is, as a ordinary unenlightened person, no, I can't. The answer is, you can't be born on the Pure Land through your power, through your abilities and the moral things you do and so on. Those are all, as Shinran says, he calls it poisoned good, very strong phrase. But he says even the good things we do, or the meditations we do, whatever it is we're doing, there's that element of self power, of self in there that we put into that, and that kind of poisons the well, so to speak. And he says that these can't be called true and real good. And he goes on to say that when we're talking about true and real, what is true and real good, and the true and real practice, it's the practice that Dharmakara was able to fulfill to become Amida Buddha, in which he now is giving the virtue, which is the power, the working of that fulfilled practice, is now he is directing it, freely to us, right, from the side of Amida. So, it's like Shinran says in Tanisho, whatever I do, hell is my home. This is the realization that comes from not just deep self-reflection based on your own ability, but from really encountering Amida's other power. You simultaneously realize you can never do any of this through your own ability. And that's what Shinran means when he says, hell is my only home. So in that sense, Shinran actually says, who is the person who's lacking the seeds of Buddhahood? It's me. I'm the person who can't become a Buddha through my own, ability and power and working and calculation. It's so that is it's important, I think, that we don't get too, like, even when you're thinking, well, have I slandered the Dharma at some time in the past or in a past life, or have I done this or that and so on. You're focusing on yourself and your ability, and we really have to turn from that to look at what is the vow saying, what is Amida's working doing, and then who are we and as the object of that. So that's I guess what I would say on the topic of
that makes sense. It does come down to, with that, I'll just say this caveat on it, it all comes down to I pretty much know I have no kind of merits that would make any difference on the path to Buddhahood. Okay. So it all comes down to whether, with these questions I ask, this about do I have the karmic causes or have I excluded myself or whatever. It comes down to receptivity to faith, receptivity to Shinjin. Have I that's kind of what, for me,
specifically that point or that.
And now I think with this question, I think now we have Shakyamuni answering it at one end of the path and Amida at the other, which basically means Amida and Amida have now settled the question.
Yes.
Shakyamuni and the combination of both, something you said was from the Nirvana Sutra, right, about the Icchantikas, and now and that passage from Shinran Shonen, it sort of that I think settles the question on. I think both those questions as far as what the Buddha Dharma says, what the teaching says in response to those situations or questions. I think I can't really, it's kind of pretty clear.
It is. Well, in Jodo Shinshu, there's certainly no, question in our school about, what the answer to those questions are. I just want to say it's interesting you mentioned Shakyamuni and Amida, right? And that's Shinran says somewhere that Shakyamuni is like our father. Shakyamuni Buddha is like our father, and then Amida Buddha is like our mother. And using their compassionate means, they awaken Shinjin in us. So that's a important passage to think about too, is the awakening of Shinjin is being done by Shakyamuni Buddha, through the Dharma that he taught and that we are listening to, right? and also through by Amida, a Buddha who is, the light and in the name, reaching us, right? So it's really all Amida, of course, because for Shinran, Shakyamuni is a manifestation of Amida in our time, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was kind of getting at when I said, I got Shakyamuni at one end and Amida at the other. Well, really Amida and Amida, because Shakyamuni and the Amana-kaya, but manifestation of Amida. But yeah, that's kind of what I was sort of getting at.
Exactly.
It ties into that other question I have about the Eternal Buddha, Lotus Sutra, Amida,
right,
being a manifestation of the Adi Buddha. Kind of all comes together in one thing. It's like, he kind of, he is all the above. Shakyamuni is all the above. He's manifestation of the Eternal Buddha. He's a manifestation of Amida Buddha. Anyway.
Right.
That's a whole nother. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse that.
No, it's a great question. Do you have? By the way, I wanted to ask now. Do you have any questions that have come up, or things that you're thinking about, or
another big one that I haven't discussed with you yet? That it's a very big one. It's one of the big ones. One of the pressing, recurring, not as pressing because it's not as recurring, but it's still very strong because of my habituated life as a seeker. And it's kind of one of the more embarrassing ones. I still have times where thoughts of the 95 non-Buddhist ways come back to mind, and I think that does seem appealing, that religion. And there's it used to be a whole plethora of that would happen many years and years ago, and then it just got narrowed down to kind of areas basically of that when my mind goes to that, and that's basically Gnosticism, which and to a much lesser extent, a very much lesser extent, the Baha'i faith.
Okay.
Another, it's like the fourth Abrahamic.
Yeah.
But it doesn't last very long when it comes into my mind. And part of it is, part of what sort of motivates that is, especially with Gnosticism, and just how I see it, it requires no other people. You don't have to be involved with anybody else. It all comes from you, and it actually comes to some very similar, very different but similar attitudes about this, this reality, the unrealness of it, and the dreamlike, from a very different sort of angle than Buddhism. It's very similar. So it sort of has that aspect that appeals to me, that is very it's very anti-worldly. It's very it is certainly. It's very and like I said, there's no need for anybody else, really. I mean, you could say, they had their teachers and initiations and all this kind of thing back in the day.
Right.
Back in the day. But when you really read what they're saying, you really have to come to this yourself completely, So and there's also an aspect of it. It's almost a way, like I like the, there's a part of me, that spiritual seeker part of me, that is attracted to a devotee kind of path, like that really, completely, totally dedicated, totally, what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
is it like having a guru kind of, or like a bhakti kind of,
No, it's not that. It's like this, that devotion to, like the absolute devotion to like the cause, the God.
Okay, so bhakti then, basically.
What's that?
Bhakti. Bhakti,
yeah,
kind of like Vishnu.
Yes.
What is it? Vishnu, Shaivism or Vishnu.
Vaishnavism. Yeah, Vaishnavism.
Yeah.
Of that. Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's actually one of them in the past that I kept kind of going back to. In the past, I mostly have gone to like those kinds of things that are similar to Buddhism. In the past, like that, that have that dharmic element to them, similar. Do you know what I mean? Similar kind of teachings, but the rebirth, all of it, it's more reincarnation, and there's an actual like somehow there's an actual, to them there's an actual soul that just keeps being, anyway. So but it also goes over to the Abrahamic, and there's the only Abrahamic faith that, like, I couldn't ever be really dedicated to one of those in that way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I just find it, there's too many just things that don't
problems.
just plethora of just doesn't, it's just not the truth at all. It's just, and there's even, you could even look at it from an angle of a deluded God that runs them, or a deluded preta,
I don't know if I would go that far, but I mean, it's certainly a different religious system, right? It's a different philosophy and worldview than the Dharma kind of system.
But somehow, so I could never do that, but somehow through Gnosticism, I could do that. Do you see what I mean? Somehow.
Yeah. Gnosticism has gotten pretty, there's a lot of interest in it, I think, recently. I also am interested in some of this stuff, but I'm not really, I don't have a super detailed knowledge about Gnosticism. Now, by Gnosticism, are you talking specifically about like Christian Gnosticism?
Not exclusively, no.
Not
just
necessarily.
The whole anything that you could, and I've come up with my own cosmology with it, and do you know what I mean? Like, my cosmology, because that's what you're kind of supposed to do as a Gnostic. Part of your spiritual path is actually to envision that.
Okay. Yeah.
Cosmology, and come up with a way that it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's like, it's a very do-it-yourself kind of path, right? Like
it is. I mean, a lot of them are. I think back in the day it probably wasn't, back in the,
right,
thousands of years ago it probably wasn't, but now, like a lot of things, it is, but it's what's the word? It's not so much like, I don't really think about it that long, to be honest. When it comes, it just recur, it'd be
that might be cool.
Yeah, it'd be so much easier to, and then I realized, well, actually, no, it wouldn't be much easier. It's a lot of self-power involved in that. It's a lot. You have to, there is a lot to it. Even if you have, you know, and I always think, oh, it's much more simple, and it's like, no, it's not. In some ways, it's far more complicated, and far more, So anyway, it doesn't last very long. Whenever my mind goes to any of these sort of paths, it doesn't. But it's very recurring. It's free. I wouldn't say as frequently as some of the other things I've talked about, but it's fairly persistent. Yeah. However minimally it lasts. Sorry, I've got people are awakening now.
Oh, no problem.
Well, distracted because there's people. I'm in the main room, which is to try to. I was trying to, because I got up to early, and I'm in the very far end of the house.
Okay.
In the kitchen dining room area. So that because my voice is very loud and carries, but now people are waking up. So that's, if you're seeing me look a little distracted, that's
no worries.
But anyway, let me. I think I'm just going to go in the other room now.
Okay.
I'll just go outside then. 1 sec. Bear with me a sec. I'm just going to nip out.
No problem.
Nip outside. Go ahead. Continue, please.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say. Well, I have a lot of thoughts actually. But let me check here. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, having an interest in, some other religion or tradition or whatever, I mean, there's really no issue with that. The only thing would be, well, let me say, in your case, if you are actively, if you're considering well, what if I actually did this path and it might work for me? Then that would be a problem where it becomes kind of a doubt that you have, right? Because you're sort of considering, instead of Jodo Shinshu, maybe I should be doing this other thing, right?
And that is part of, it's not just a passing interest. It's where my mind actually goes,
maybe I should do it.
And that is a belief. Maybe I should still just believe in God, and and hear me now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. You're cutting out a little bit, so maybe the connection is not as good where you are now.
I'm outside. Let me just open that door. There, let's see if that's better. Is that better? Yeah,
I can hear you now, no problem.
Okay. So it's not just a passing interest. It's, maybe I should be simple. It would be easy. My mind thinks, it'd just be simpler and less complicated. Yeah. But then when I actually go, well, actually, is it? Is it actually less complicated? Yeah. It's actually, and it's far more confusing, and there's far more things that I cannot live up to, and there's far more things in my life that, just in my own personal life, that gives me evidence that, well, that doesn't work. that point of view, that viewpoint, that world view in general just doesn't. It's so antithetical to my entire experience that I just go, no, okay, that's right. Oh yeah, that's right. I just silly monkey mind. There I went again. There I go again. Yeah.
Right. I think though that people who well, I don't want to generalize, but in general, I have found that people who leave Jodo Shinshu and decide to, do some other religion, typically, in my experience and opinion, typically did not have a very complete grasp of Jodo Shinshu teaching. They may have been very enthusiastic. They may have had some level of knowledge, or something. But generally speaking, they didn't have, like, because I personally feel like if you really understand Shinran Shonin's teaching and the teaching of the primal vow, it is going to be, if you truly understand it, right? I mean, I think it will be spiritually sufficient for you. Like, I think it's a satisfying, you're not going to necessarily be thinking, well, maybe I should be, a Sufi or something, and I'd be getting so much more out of life. But the problem is, for us who are not, who weren't necessarily raised in Jodo Shinshu or are approaching it from, as converts, right? And especially converts from a different cultural context, reaching that level of deep understanding and true, appreciation of Jodo Shinshu beyond just the surface level stuff, right? And hopefully that's where I can be helpful, because, I do know some Japanese and so on, and I can help you to sort of, like we've been doing, really digging into what, what is unique about Shinran Shonin's teaching, what is, what makes Jodo Shinshu different from, some of other religions and so on. So I do think that's important. But on the other hand, there's really no issue with having, an interest in other religions. I mean, I myself am interested in various other religious paths and so on, and I sometimes study them, but
it's just where my monkey mind just goes, yeah, really, should I consider that again? Like, and that's not just a passing interest that I'm talking about here. It's it's a habituated from decades of being a seeker, I think,
right,
of this habituated, and there's probably some kind of deep ingrained thing from my Christian upbringing, my fundamentalist, Christian upbringing, of some kind of deep ingrained, like, I should still believe in God, somewhere. And my unconscious. No, I mean, can you still hear me?
Yeah, definitely.
Something like that is in there. There's probably, and it's like I said, just habituated, just the habituated mind state of that, being a seeker for so long, a spiritual seeker of all. Like, I explored so many different paths back in the day. This way, mostly I'd say kind of in the 90s. It's more to that, but so okay, we're done. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. Good. I can go back inside now. Yeah. So I can go back inside because, So it's. I'd say it's. It's more than just a passing interest when that.
Yeah, it's a real.
It doesn't last long. It doesn't last long. When I look at those other paths and I go, should I? It's more than just, that's interesting. It's like maybe I should just do that. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's and like I said, it doesn't last very long anymore. It could be a few minutes, few hours, few days, where that's happening, and then eventually I go, oh yeah, that's because the 95 non-Buddhist guys just don't. They're just no. and whatever I'm looking at right now is part of that. And it just doesn't
on any level. It just doesn't work. I know that, like, there's nothing that's superior. There's nothing that surpasses the Buddhist teaching. There really isn't. I can't, like, I know that, like, and eventually, and then I go look at not only I just know that there's nothing that surpasses Buddhism, but I look and I go, it just, these other 95 this path I'm looking at right now does not really speak to my experience, at all.
Well, and it also depends on what your goal
especially belief systems are that involves, like, creation, creation, and like that, like God. It's like, well, I would not think much of a God that created this. Underlyingly, I know that,
right.
Like, really, this is what this is what you can come up with. Seriously? Like, wow. And and you'd have to be pretty demented and evil to come up with it, if you're gonna create something, like, what I mean? So I know that, like, I know, like, and it doesn't, as far as it doesn't, like, so much of what those let's say the Abrahamic paths teach just doesn't match with my experience of life. From very young child through till now. It's like, doesn't, not without some serious mental gymnastics, like and serious mental acrobatics, never mind acrobatics, and serious, like, Stockholm syndrome levels of brain, like, self brainwashing that I'd have to do to somehow be able to buy it and believe it, and then to be able to live by it and look back at my life and go, well, there's nothing just about, like, in their thing of, you know what I mean? There's nothing just about a God that would allow all these kinds of, you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm just trying to short, I don't think it's even worth talking that much about the specifics of it. It's just that it kind of recurs, and it's very persistent. Not as much as maybe some other things are, but it's very much persistent, that mind state. Oh, perhaps I should go do this,
Right. Well, I think it shows that you are, you're probably still, well, for being a seeker for so long, you probably still have that, sort of habitual mindset of, looking at things and thinking, well, what about this? The only other thing I would say about the other religions other than Buddhism is, the reason why I would say we want to be careful not to say, like, that the gods they worship are, evil demons or something like that. That's a bit extreme, because in Buddhism, of course, as you know, right, like, a bodhisattva isn't necessarily a Buddhist, right? So there could be bodhisattvas in other religions, undercover bodhisattvas, you could say. And
but they're not. They're right. They're using provisional means. They're using skillful means through other religions to or
exactly.
through other.
And the Buddha, clearly states in some sutras that he appears in some cases as heretical non-Buddhist teachers in order to guide heretical non-Buddhists, and so we want to be careful we're not taking too narrow a view of Buddhism, right? So, that's the only thing I would say there. But on the other hand, as a Buddhist, we believe that the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, did reveal the way to enlightenment, right? Which is the highest spiritual goal. So, it does depend on what your goal is, your spiritual goal is, I mean, if your spiritual goal is to live forever in heaven with Jesus, then Christianity might be the good path for you, right? So yeah. So but if your spiritual goal is complete, total, perfect Buddhahood and the ability to save other beings, and personally, I think that the ideal of the Bodhisattva in Buddhism, of the being who says, like Amida, like Dharmakara says, like Amida says, which is, if I cannot be happy if you are not, happy. He says, I won't achieve that Buddhahood, that perfect state, unless all beings equally do. And this is an amazing, really I think a pivotal spiritual breakthrough in Mahayana Buddhism that really isn't found in other religions, as much. I mean, I do think there are a lot of good teachings in, of course, Christianity and, in Islam and other religions, but, the Bodhisattva ideal is really, and in the vow, the teaching of the Mahayana teaching of the vows is, for me, really a unique and powerful thing that I personally didn't find in other, faiths to that extent. So, so that's my perspective, obviously. But I do get where you're coming from. I mean, I too have thought, well, what if I had, well, before I was following Jodo Shinshu, and even before I was necessarily committed to Buddhism, I was looking at all kinds of religions. I was, looking at different Christian traditions, and I was looking at Hinduism and all kinds of different stuff, and a lot of it was really interesting and really appealing. And then I discovered Shinran and the larger sutra, and I was like, this is it. That's really what I thought. But even when I found Buddhism, I was first looking at Theravada mainly, and I really thought that the teaching of Shakyamuni was just so beautiful and appealing, and it made sense, and it was very warm and welcoming, and it's amazing how so long ago Shakyamuni was teaching this tolerant, non-violent, path to spiritual liberation, right? And so that grabbed me. And then I started looking into Mahayana sutras, and I read Professor Inagaki's translation of the larger sutra and the 3 Pure Land sutras. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is really something else. And then in that book, he mentions Shinran Shonin and Pure Land Buddhism as being, a religion based on the larger sutra. And that piqued my interest. I thought, wow, it would be really cool if there was like a whole school based on this sutra. And so I got the collected works of Shinran and read Shinran's writing. And that was, and that's when I thought, this is it. This is the path that I, want to really follow.
Right. Oh. It's sort of like that to me. For me, it's been like that. Nothing else has. Well, Buddhism in general has been like that. In general, the Buddha Dharma in general. Was like, of all the stuff I searched, that is the most consistent, true. Where it says it's good at the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. That thing in the sutras where it says that that really proved true to me. Like, no matter what angle I look at this from, it comes back to Buddhism. Even if I go into other philosophies and things, actually, if I take it as far as it'll go, well, that's a
Right.
good, much better way. So why don't I go? It's just Buddhism,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
similarly, other things. But and then when I came to Pure Land Buddhism, it was like, when I really, not just when the seed was planted back in the 90s when I read that article, and wouldn't that be nice to be able to follow that path? I wish I could, but I must, and then later on realized,
Right.
in a very dramatic way, really cried out to Amida, as I told you. But and since then, though, like, when I look at other paths, I just go, well, this is supreme. It just is supreme. So it almost doesn't matter these other things where I have that very strong habituated mind state. Really, it's really a strong to go look at the thing, and maybe I can embrace that, and it'd be this delusion that somehow it would be simpler, and it's much more confusing. It's complicated and ridiculous. It almost doesn't matter whether it's Gnosticism or what it is I'm looking at. It's just that it is a doubt. It is a doubt that I'm looking at strongly at those other things still, even if it is this habituated way, there isn't a doubt there, and it's a problem. It's definitely a problem. Like, it's definitely something that needs resolving and settling by Amida if I'm gonna have that and resolve all the doubts. That's definitely one of them that has, at some point, that's got to.
Yeah, and I think it's great. It's great, first of all, that you mentioned it, because as we've mentioned before, there's no the only bad question is the one you don't ask, right? When it comes to listening and figuring this stuff out. I mean, you've got to face your questions and doubts head on. It doesn't do to sweep things under the bed, it's just gonna come back to bite you later, So I wouldn't necessarily say don't study or learn about other religions. I mean, you can certainly do that, but I do think, like I said before, generally it seems to me like the people who don't stick with Jodo Shinshu are the ones who had a kind of a superficial understanding and didn't really go deeper to what Shinron's thought is and what the actual teaching beyond kind of the basic stuff. And so I mean, I'm not saying you have to have
hadn't penetrated, because I think there's some people who have gone very deeply into it and left.
And that too. That too.
Really, but it just somehow hadn't penetrated to the depths, I guess. Sorry, go ahead.
And in that case, maybe there is a question where someone's karma, or hadn't quite matured to that point. I mean, we could certainly maybe speculate on that, but I would say just really what you're doing with listening and thinking about the teaching, reflecting on the teaching and asking questions, and like Rinyo Shonin said, throw your basket in the water, immerse your basket in the water, is really the only thing to do. I mean, I certainly wouldn't it's, if you have a doubt about other religions and teachings and so on, I mean, it's just something you have to kind of resolve. But I think if you are determined to follow Jodo Shinshu, then I think that understanding Shinran's teaching and where, what is the relation between some of the Jodo Shinshu teaching and other ideas, that'll probably resolve those questions you have, I mean, I personally,
they're so different. Like when I go to these other, it's so complete. It's such a completely different thing. You know what I mean?
right.
That it's almost like, ridiculous. That's why it's so, because it's such a different, everything about these other, religions or paths that might have that habituated like urge to, maybe I should follow that. It's almost not like, but obviously it's there. My mind can still say, well, maybe, but it's so different than what Buddhism teaches. It's so, no, and I know that. I know how it's not. It's like very different and is very, so that's one of the reasons it doesn't last very long, because my Dharma eye goes, really you're thinking about this, like, and that's why it's embarrassing. That's why I said, like, it's funny that this is like one of the most embarrassing things for me to talk about is my urge to be like a spiritual seeker still in other contexts.
Right.
Like, that's most embarrassing. Like not my blind passions, and the most embarrassing is, although I am I am very ashamed of my my karmic state, but you know what I'm saying, like the most embarrassing of the questions that I have is having to raise this. I think I've avoided it for a long time.
I don't think it's embarrassing. I mean, I think you've been a speaker.
It's just ridiculous. Like thinking about when I look at the other religion, it's just like, how can I be so completely ruled by my monkey mind and so deluded and so because there's an explanation for that. I'm a spiritual idiot. I'm a bumbu, so and I live in Mappo, so of course I gotta and I don't have Shinjin, so yes, of course that's gonna happen.
Well,
but I'm saying so different. Buddhism is so surpassing of anything else, and I'm like, how? That's why it's embarrassing. Is that my mind is still so habituated that it would still have that question or have that doubt of it could be maybe even a little bit of a, oh mommy, oh no, this is way too scary over here. This is for that. This is an old security blanket over here.
I think you're referring to the sense of familiarity. Because you were raised in a Christian cultural context. The idea maybe it would be better and safer and I could sleep better at night just believing in the stuff everybody around me believes.
Rather than this samsaric saha world of where I actually am and realizing the implication, like every moment, it's on my mind a lot. It's like, that it's anyway. It's almost not that important, the specifics of what I go to, but just the fact that I go, oh, you know what I mean? Because like the specifics, Buddhism itself levels the specifics of the other 95 non-Buddhist ways. Just Buddhism being Buddhism is just so supreme that so it's more that I have that doubt that I could think, oh, maybe check this, maybe if I can embrace this, maybe it'll be easier, and I can just, there's still that,
And Shinran says that the inclination, toward the 95,000 or the 95, however many non-Buddhist ways is part of self-power, right? It's part of all of that. He says, I'll try to find the passage, but
oh, please do. Yeah.
I know.
I didn't know he says.
He does.
I should say I don't know if it was in anyway. Yeah.
And but like Kobai Sensei says, I think we're almost out of time, but Kobai Sensei has a remark in one of his books where we don't like well, we meaning people don't typically like choose, like look at all the religions and then compare them and then choose which one they think is best. We believe in the religion that saves us, so and I think what he means by that is like you do have to well, no matter how great and noble and wonderful a religion may be, if it doesn't bring benefit to you, then you have to find something else, right? So, and I know I mentioned Reverend Tetsuo Unno before. He's a minister in the Buddhist Churches of America, which is the Honganji branch in America. But he made a great remark in a sermon he gave where he said that what exactly did he say? He said there are other religions and they're all great. Jodo Shinshu just happens to be the greatest. And I thought, yeah, that is exactly how I feel. I mean, he just spoke exactly and he said, and then he went on and said, no, there's no doubt about in my mind, because that's a pretty provocative thing to say from a pulpit, right? I mean, my religion is the greatest, But, and then he said, no, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, Shinran Shonin's teaching really is, the greatest. And it's not that other religions aren't great. It's not that they don't have benefit that they bring to people and so on. But again, to use Kobai Sensei's comment, for me, what religion saves me, what religion benefits me. So that's something, but it's a personal journey. I mean, it's something you have to, as a seeker, as a spiritual seeker, I mean, each of us has to come to that conclusion, that realization on our own, so it's but I do like what Reverend Tetsuo Unno said, but
Buddhism literally does it. It gives everything. It gives you everything, and doesn't take anything, and doesn't harm. Well, it doesn't harm anything. Like it doesn't harm. It's not harmful. It's helpful. There's any other of the 95 Buddhist ways. There's it's a mix.
there are those. It's a mix.
Some are worse than others, but it's always
some
a
are
mix.
definitely.
Whereas for me, Buddhism does not harm at all. It just it gives, and it doesn't. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't. There's no mix.
I agree. Good. It's good in the Dharma. Good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. It's pure and maintaining its purity. Shakyamuni said. Yeah. But let's definitely continue to work on this question and in any additional questions that arise because of it. And I do think, like, if there are specifics, I mean, like you said, it doesn't really matter what specifics, but I mean, I think if you find like a certain aspect, of some other religion appealing, then it might be beneficial to like point that out and then say, well, what is a equivalent or comparable teaching in Jodo Shinshu, or what does Jodo Shinshu have to say about this problem, like, and that might be helpful, in your understanding of Jodo Shinshu. So, but again, if you have questions about that, then feel free to bring them up.
Okay.
We can certainly.
Yeah, I don't think it's set the. I don't think just by discussing it, it's okay. It's done with now. I won't.
No. Yeah. Well, we know that it's like we're taking a water drop on the rock and expecting a hole to, appear. Doesn't work that way.
Exactly. So,
yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much once again. It's really been very helpful and a very good talk. And yeah, this was another one I knew I eventually had to bring up, but it's the most embarrassing one that I just was
now it's off your chest.
Avoiding saving it till after I brought up some of the more pressing, more recurrent, more stronger ones. But this one's up there. This is probably in the top 10 of my doubts, issues, blockages of the channels of faith type of things. So
yeah, well, let's definitely work on it. And I do have some other topics. I'll find that passage as well and share it in our next session. And then any other questions you want to pursue, or I have some topics that I think might be of interest as well. So
yeah, the stuff you brought up in the beginning was really helpful about the slander of the Dharma, the Icchantika thing, the idea of the am I just karma capable, or in and those passages you were good, spot on. So I think that is, if it hasn't settled that question, it's gone a long way toward that.
Good
with already, and you citing those passages that you did. So
wonderful.
Yeah, very good. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have a nice your afternoon and
day. You too, Scott.
All right. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.